Legal Value Network's webinar, Follow the Dollar, Tech's Impact on Legal Service Delivery. I'm Chris Endy. I'm the Chief Value Officer at Goulston Stores and also a Legal Value Network board member. On behalf of the board, thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are not as familiar with Legal Value Network, organization that started a few months ago to bring together a community to help accelerate evolution in the legal industry. We've had quite a bit of content come out in the last few months, webinars, podcasts, newsletter, our Council of Luminary series, and a lot more on the horizon. We're planning some social events, some lab work, and also we're really excited about our 2021 conference experience, and a lot more to come on that, so stay tuned on our website and our LinkedIn page. For those of you who are not yet members of Legal Value Network, I encourage you to join our community. It's an amazing group of people. It's a great place to network, to find educational opportunities. And for the rest of calendar year 2020, we have a couple of great membership opportunities. If you join this year as a dues-paying member, you'll receive founding member status, which gets you discounts off future programs. In addition to that, we understand a lot of people, it's a challenging time right now and budgets are tight. So we're also offering complimentary membership for anyone through the end of the calendar year as well. So if you haven't already, please go to legalvaluenetwork.com, check us out. And when you're there, please make sure to sign up and become part of our community. So before we jump into the program, a couple of housekeeping items. The only video you're going to see today is of the panelists and their presentation. You're all going to be on mute except for the panelists. We are going to be recording the session, so you can watch it again later and send it to your friends through our website, legalvaluenetwork.com. And finally, we do encourage questions. And for questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. Don't use the chat for questions, just use the Q&A. Our panelists will be checking it throughout the program and we'll get to your questions. So with that out of the way, I'm excited about our program today, Follow the Dollar, Tech's Impact on the Legal Service Delivery. And we have two great panelists to lead us today. First, we have Zach Posner, who's the Managing Director at the Legal Tech Fund. Zach is a three-time entrepreneur turned investor with a passion for how artificial intelligence can improve the world. Entrepreneurs regularly seek out Zach's guidance on a variety of issues about thinking about business, when they have roadblocks, and advice with internal and external challenges. Zach is a technology leader. He has experience in quite a few things, impact investing, venture capital, SaaS, acquisitions, on and on. I had the great pleasure of being introduced to Zach a couple months ago. He has an amazing lens into legal tech that was unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I'm thrilled that he agreed to join us and share some of his knowledge and expertise with all of you. Our second presenter today is Wendy Curtis, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at Orrick, Herrington, Sutcliffe. For 3 years in a row, Orrick has won the Financial Times Most Innovative Law Firm in North America award. In addition, Wendy has received their award in 2018 for the Most Innovative Lawyer of the Year. She is celebrated by her clients and her peers for fresh thinking, legal nuance, and she's introduced numerous new technologies and delivery models across the firm. I've known Wendy as well for many years. She's truly one of the leaders in our space, and we're thrilled that she's joined us today. And I think along with Zach, this is a tremendous group to lead our presentation. So with that, Zach, Wendy, thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for the kind words, and thank you to everybody for joining today. So I'm just queuing up a couple slides, assuming everybody can kind of see them. So quick agenda from our side. First, we want to say hello, give a little background on ourselves, although Chris just did a good job of that. Talk about some of the things that we're seeing in the space. I think this is a space that both myself and Wendy, we kind of spend an extraordinary amount of time in. So we'd love to share some of that with you. The theme of today is called Following the Dollar. So we're thinking a lot about early stage technology companies. And we wanted to just highlight a few of these companies for you, just to give you a sense as to like what's out there and give you some examples. And then I think we want to have some time for questions. I think that in general, though, please populate that Q&A box. We're glad to kind of be interrupted at any time. And yeah, so first section was called Hello. Hello. From our end, my name again, Zach Posner. I'm a co-founder and the managing director of the Legal Tech Fund, which definitely tell you about in the next couple slides. My background is I kind of started out my career in the venture capital industry, left about 15 years ago to start operating software companies, had the amazing honor of working alongside some great teams. We built software that spread to millions of folks across the globe, and that was in education, in health, in energy. And then about a year ago, started to formulate the thesis and start thinking about the Legal Tech Fund, which again, you'll learn about. I think that one thing you'll see is how often we're talking to people to get our arms around the companies in the space, the different pain points that people have. And one of those people that we got to speak to, you know, probably 6, 7, 8 months ago was Wendy. And I've just been blown away by every interaction that I've had with her. You know, again, we speak to a lot of people, and by far up there is the most knowledgeable person in this space, and kind of thrilled that she's with me, and we're partnering up to share some stories with you guys today. But with that, Wendy, why don't you introduce yourself or give a little context?
Sure. I clearly bribed everyone effectively. So I would like to invite you to all my dinner parties, all my children's events. But I was looking at the participants as we were kicking off, and there are a lot of friendly faces and names. And as Zach and Chris and others said, we hope to make this interactive and as valuable for your time as possible. And so I know many of you, and you will have great insights also, so please queue those up. One of my big responsibilities today is to monitor the Q&A, and so I want to start strong. And we got a question about whether or not the slides will be available afterwards. I think Janet and Chris are somewhere floating in the background with all the power and authority, so they may be able to chime in on the Q&A on how we'll distribute that. But to answer the first question, and really I'm thrilled to be here, so to Zach and Janet and Chris who invited me, thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. So I guess we have just a couple polls, but before we get started, we wanted to ask you guys a simple question. You know, what is the level of excitement around tech adoption in your organization? And as I pause here, I realize we should have had some fun background music. Yeah.
I have many skills, but singing is not one of them.
All righty. It looks like we have a forward-thinking audience. I like this. All righty. Great. Thank you. Let me close this one out. Or Johnny, can we close that one out? All right, so high level, you know, we definitely come across a lot of folks in our day-to-day that, you know, we mentioned that we're the Legal Tech Fund, which we'll explain what that means in a couple minutes. And, you know, they're not so excited, or they say, hey, here's what we hear. We hear that, you know, we're going to learn a lot of stuff about tech. The implementation of legal tech is going to be easy, you know, 1 week tops. The software is going to integrate with everything. And, you know, that means your team's not going to have to do any additional work. And of course, it'll solve all your problems. And then kind of some of the feedback we've gotten historically is that means you're going to get 40 emails a day from vendors. Yeah, I see Wendy nodding her head. You're going to get, you know, some of this stuff is going to take, you know, 3 months, not 1 week. Integrate with everything, but not with your version. No additional work, well, except for we got to convert all your files and solve all your problems. Still like a big TBD. But we think some of that stuff's going to change, and you know what we're starting to see is a big shift, almost like the way that our personal lives, the way that we've incorporated software into it and really turned to rely on it. We think that's going to happen more and more within the legal space. So the example that I love to say is, you know, if we think about the email system that we use personally. This has become for me a repository of all my files, of everything, and it's just years and years that's been built up. And I think if you think about your email provider, and I guess you've had it further along if you look out to the right on this, my question to you guys would be, how would it feel if I took away your personal email from you today? And my guess is that would kind of make your heart sink a little bit. And, or at the same time, how would it be if one of these providers came back and said, hey, we're going to charge you $50 a year for your email? You'd be fine as well, because this has become so important to you that you can't imagine a world where you're living without it. And for us as a kind of a fund, and what we're seeing with the activity that's happening and the software that's coming out, we think this is going to start to happen a lot more within the legal tech space. So just a quick perspective, the lens that we're approaching this from, at the Legal Tech Fund, we're a strategic venture capital fund that invests in companies that are transforming the world of law. And when I say that, a couple words in there. One is this concept of strategic, and that's because we team up with advisors like folks on this call every single day to help us understand and grow our companies. I'm going to explain what our goals are with the venture fund, but we're investing in the earliest stage of companies. So, the words pre-seed to Series A, for us, that means, you start up, a company has an idea, maybe they have a couple customers and a little bit of revenue, but these are not your massive companies yet. We're trying to catch these companies really early. And then I think the final concept is that we use the concept of the world of law, because we think it's a lot bigger than just some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. Law affects people, organizations, and industries. But maybe from your end, Wendy, if you want to give a quick overview, because you
Sure.
think with multiple hats on.
I do. So we are obviously a consumer of services that Zach's fund invests in. We actually have our own legal tech fund, and so we've made 2 investments. And our criteria is when we make an investment, we're looking at a technology that we think is important, and that by investing, we can accelerate getting that service to our clients, and that it's a service that they need. We also then have our own team. So we have Orrick Labs, which is our skunk work. Our strategy is to go to market first, to buy where we can, and then if we can't, then we'll develop internally. And we do have a product that we're about to spin out, but we're kind of a consumer, an investor, an advisor. And so it's really interesting, and working with Zach and other investors in this space, it really opens up how we think about things. And I think one of the most important points that you made just now, Zach, that was resonating with me is that it's much bigger than legal. And I think as we go through the slides, you'll see that theme and the application of technology in other verticals and other industries, and how that then is going to translate to where we live.
Yeah, and I think that, and just for those that aren't familiar with how a venture fund works or how the investing side of it works, I wanted to simplify what we do. And a lot of this, there's direct crossover to what Wendy's thinking about on the investing side. But our real job as venture investors is we're trying to focus on 3 big concepts. The first one is we want to sift through the noise. So we're about to show you some slides that talk about, just how much activity there is out there. And what we want to do is find the companies that you love and that we believe can grow to be large businesses. And I think the second step is that we then want to invest capital with the founders so they can be successful. And we use that word capital, and yes, part of that is financial capital, dollars, where we end up taking ownership in the company. But it's also the human capital side, where we're helping with relationships, we're helping with past experiences. For me, it's much more about how you build a software company and what are the different stages that you go through. And then the third thing that we're trying to do is just help the company reach its full potential. And yes, there's a financial side to that, where that could mean a sale, that could mean an IPO, but it's also from a mission perspective and how the company is driving the impact that the entrepreneurs want to drive. And most of the time we see, or the stuff that gets us most excited, is heavily themed impact-oriented companies, because when everybody is focusing on the impact, the good stuff around the financial usually happens because everybody's so invested in what they're doing. Wendy, anything to add? Awesome. So I guess the second section, what we're seeing this is really our lens, how we see the world. And I think that we are very similar with Wendy and the Orrick folks. I think the first thing is that we're seeing a lot. And for us at the Legal Tech Fund, that means over 100 companies a month. And what we're doing, and similar to what Wendy's doing, is talking to venture capital funds, all the other funds out there. We're talking to accelerators and incubators. There's actually 36 of them across the globe that are legal specific. So I think that in, every country has rules on who and how you can practice law. Some of the ones across the globe, the countries, are a little bit more liberal in their definitions. So you see a bigger role that technology can play. So we see lots of activity, but we talk to all these folks, and each one of them is talking to 5 or 10 or bringing on 5 or 10 companies a year. And we like to be that next step where those companies can go once they graduate from those programs. And then really an advisor set of folks that includes Fortune 500 folks, AM Law 100s, private equity funds. And what this means is we just see an extraordinary amount of companies that we database into our own internal systems. And I think, and Wendy, curious a little bit how you guys think about it.
Yep. So I was actually thinking about you. This is what you get when you compliment me early on. So I was looking at that 1750 figure and thinking about the folks who are participating who may very well be in law firms or law departments, and how the fund is helpful beyond some of the obvious ways. And with, almost 2,000 companies being tracked, and you're going to have some other great statistics coming up about the scope of companies and the scope of investment. There are so many point solutions, and we all think there's going to be consolidation, and we all think there's going to be platformization. And so you're trying to make these decisions in what is now a very crowded market. And so seeing where you invest, seeing at what stage the investments are happening, where purchases, it really helps those of us who are the consumer start to be able to figure out who's going to make it long term, who is more than just a point solution. And so I think that 1750 number is just so telling.
Yeah, and but there's actually a larger base that we're not tracking that goes even bigger, it goes to 3,000. And you look at the fundings, 700 of these things have been funded. So now I hope everybody is starting to understand why their email boxes keep kind of increasing with companies saying hello. I think from our end, and I know that Wendy's been thinking a lot about this stuff as well. We had to do a lot of mapping of this space, because right now, there's a lot of chaos happening and there's not great tools. And the first thing for us to understand the chaos is we have to look at, every single vertical and how every single component's being affected. And that, so we've built out some pretty extensive maps. Even if something like transactions, like we're looking at transactions and say, okay, that's a category, but then you can break that down into every step of a transactions, from due diligence to drafting to negotiation to closing, and then there's even subcategories. So this is a lot of the work that we think about on a day-to-day basis. You're going to get one shameless plug from us, but there's something called Nate's News. And, this is where we're actually publicizing what's kind of happening. And this is a monthly email newsletter that we would love it if you could, if you signed up for. The link is on the screen, or just go to legaltech.com. Also want to thank Nate for helping us put this presentation together. Nate's an associate with the team. We named the newsletter after him. But I think just as importantly is the content of this. In Q3 alone, we saw $530 million being invested in the companies that touch this space. And in fact, in the last 30 days, the newsletter came out yesterday, we saw over $250 million going into this space. So what the dollars in means is that you're going to see a lot more engineers being hired, and you're going to see a lot more innovations from a company perspective. But this is just a trend that continues, where I think in 2015, we tracked about 300 million into this space. 2019, we tracked 1.4 billion. And from the numbers I just told you, it's kind of growing from there. The other component is that besides legal tech and some of the software we're going to talk to you about today, we think legal really sits in the center of every industry. So, me and Wendy find ourselves talking about companies that are helping in the privacy world. They're helping with implementation of GDPR, or California's new privacy laws. And to the rest of the world, these look like privacy companies, but they greatly, but they're all about your privacy policies, which is very much a legal process and kind of in the legal realm. Yeah, Wendy, any comments on how you guys think about tracking, or?
Well, I was just thinking about the Nate's News previous slide and then the circular graph here, this idea that I don't think anybody's going to be surprised to see investment in contract lifecycle management, right? We're hearing a lot about that. There's a lot of hype and discussion, but in that same version or of Nate's newsletter, you had the discussion of the anti-money laundering technology and the intersection too of at our clients, who's buying the technology. So it may be the compliance group that sits outside of legal, or in the privacy and cyber, it may be the chief security officer, but they come together and understanding that and how it impacts what we do, what's automated, the information that we can use to do our analysis. I just think that makes the combination of the two in your circular graph is really powerful. And then as you would categorize this, it's something we've been working on too, and I know there are others trying to make this information available to everybody in the market. I think it also improves our overall satisfaction in the profession. In many ways allows us to practice at the top of our license. We'll talk about this a little bit in a minute, but we're going to launch by November to the market something called the Observatory, which does much of what, and thank you because I know you helped us with some of our categories, categorizing at least the companies that we're tracking. So you have about 2,000 that you're tracking, we have about 600, and I'm getting this information out and even defining them and seeing if the way that we define the company and the category that we think that they should sit in aligns with what the company thinks about themselves. And so I think this whole process is really important, and for collaboration about both the consumer, the investor, the legal tech company themselves.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And a perfect example is like you mentioned the contract automation tools. So, I want to tell you a story, right? Like the next slide talks about a contract automation tool, but it doesn't sit within legal. It sits within property tech. So an example here is, and this is a, just a high level example, but this is software that helps manage your commercial real estate lease. So instead of building a lease and negotiating it on Microsoft Word, you negotiate it on a company's platform. So because of that, historically, there was lots of stuff that attorneys did, and attorneys still obviously have a pretty big role in this going forward, but there's software here that's helping with the drafting and the abstraction. And this is stuff that just makes the attorney's life easier, or it even empowers the end client where they can do a lot more things in-house with the leasing agent. But what's really neat is when you get these verticalized applications. So this is not just a generic contract automation tool. This is very specifically for real estate. You have what we like to refer to as like data exhaust. So what that means is if you get the drafting and the abstraction, the drafting happens naturally because you build it. Every word is then databased. You can then automatically abstract, which means that's simplifying the life for an attorney, making things easier. But then you get this exhaust where things happen like you understand what's happened to market rent across the globe, because you're seeing leases getting signed on your platform every single day, and all of that data is now structured for the first time. So it's no longer in a PDF, it's now in a database. This one specific company that I'm talking about, they actually think that they're going to get into insurance underwriting because they don't believe that the liability language from a commercial real estate lease flows through into pricing an insurance premium. But it turns out that that language means a lot. Who's liable for what? But all of this like data exhaust is what's creating like businesses that have nothing to do with the law, but business opportunities for new software companies. So we're thinking about this as a huge, almost like value rebouncing through technology.
Before
And
you
just
go
on
past
that
that too, if we could just go back, I think on the data exhaust and for the law firm folks in law department, we hear over and over, and we've met with over 100 clients just on innovation conversations in the last year, that we know we all have data exhaust too, but that exhaust has the potential to be monetized and bring value back to the business. And so really digging in and the unintended benefits, the industry observations, like how do you get to that? How do you understand it? This is one of the key things that's going to change the legal industry. And the unintended piece, which is so unusual, I think, for lawyers, we kind of think that we know the question and then the answer that we're going to get. But once you get in there, you learn that it's telling on things that you may not have anticipated.
Yeah, and to go even higher level, I mean, this is the concept of artificial intelligence coming into every industry. But, you know, there's a quote that we love, and that a Stanford professor said, and he said, data is the new oil. You know, data is going to be this commodity that becomes so valuable, you know, and I think it's going to create we're just seeing it create new business opportunities in ways that we never could have imagined. And this is only going to accelerate. You know, I think on that note, for us, we're looking at the world in three big themes. I think today we're going to spend some time on one of them that's really relevant to law firms and their clients. But the first theme is just that concept that agreements are the foundation of business and they hold source data. So again, and that's the example I just gave you. Let's stop thinking of that as a PDF. Let's start thinking of that as a database. And then you get really neat businesses that can happen from that. The second one is one that we talk about the impact side of this and finding like mission-driven entrepreneurs. And it's just a concept that like legal services are not available to all in this country. And very specifically, I think there's a 0.65 of a civil attorney for every 10,000 low-income Americans. And when you look at the median rate of an attorney, which is about $365 an hour, versus the median wage of a worker in this country, it's $19.14. And there's like such a big disconnect there that we think technology has a massive role to play. And we're seeing some software come out there that will, if you have a criminal record that is eligible to be expunged, you don't need to go to an attorney for $2,500 or $5,000 to fill out a couple of forms. This software will do it for $200 for you. We are seeing things, you take a picture of a parking ticket, it will automatically fight that parking ticket for you. So really excited about this theme. And then I think the third one that we're going to spend a bit of time on, just highlighting some of the companies that are out there, is this concept of following the dollar. And it's really just saying, okay, how is the $1 trillion legal services market? Like what's happening to it? Where are we seeing efficiencies? Where are we seeing opportunities to save money, to redistribute things? And, we'll talk about that in a second. I guess we're a second later. Following the dollar. So I guess, Wendy, anything else before we transition? Awesome. I think first and foremost, here's we're going to talk about a lot of companies here, and I think neither of us, we both want to be careful. We're not endorsing any companies here. The only purpose here is to just highlight some of examples of software companies to get everybody thinking about what's possible and kind of what's happening in the space. We're going to provide just a super high level overview. I definitely think there's lots of you folks that have talked to some of these companies and you probably know this stuff better than us, but again, or better than me. But the theme here is just kind of touching on what we're seeing, and please don't take any of this as an endorsement for any of these companies. So we broke these concepts up into three different areas. The first one has to do with firm selection. The second one is communication and collaboration between firms and their clients. And then the third one is matter review. And we plan to talk again about a couple companies that affect each one of these. The first theme is really about finding the best team for each matter. And that can come to fruition. That may mean finding new attorneys that are helping you, finding new law firms. That may mean how do you use your existing panel better? How do you use your existing law firms better? But I think this is kind of the high level first theme. And I'm going to, we'll just jump in and talk about some companies to explain. I think that, we're seeing an uptick and we're hearing there's a big uptick for the concept of RFPs happening in this space. And the first company is one that we've just been tracking and keeping an eye on called Redoc. And what they're essentially doing is building a knowledge management platform for RFPs. So that means that if you're issuing the RFP, you can store everything that you've ever done previously. You can store your responses. And this enables you to write a better, more effective RFP going forward. And if you're responding to an RFP, this is a tool that enables you to basically have every single response that you guys have ever had, and to quickly surface the knowledge that right now may be hidden in, Excel hell or Word or in different file folders with different people. So just simple tools to help manage that.
Before you go past that too, Zach, I want to say thanks to HBR. They actually did an event with a group of general counsel this summer and allowed us to use some of the findings and to kind of use the Clay Christensen who, from Harvard, who recently passed away, but his whole disruption idea, what's the job to be done? So with this recent sounding board that HBR did with general counsel, one of the jobs that need to be done, one of the problems that needs to be solved is actually using RFP tools in the traditional way, but one of the findings was to actually use the RFP tools even with the panel firms. I think it's just interesting to put in context the usage and confirm demand.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually a perfect segue. So what Pursuit is really focused on is how you can interact with your current panel of firms. But again, their real specialty here is, opposed to navigating through these huge documents, I think what the CEO talks about a lot is the consumerization of this software. How do we create software that is so simple that this is not a massive shrug process like once you see an RFP, it's just a beautiful experience for everybody involved. And again, focused on your specific panel opposed to finding new firms. And I think that's actually a great transition to the next company is Priory, and they have really been consolidating and building profiles of specific expertises that firms, that attorneys have. And the theory here is, how do you match to a finite level the exact skill set that you may need on a matter and somebody's prior experience? And so it's just kind of and you'll notice all of these things are kind of working on these bigger challenges from different perspectives, and it's interesting to see each of the companies and how they approach these.
And I should just close before you go fast to that it's about to be publicly announced that through the Legal Tech Fund, Orrick is investing in Priory. But what all of these tools I think also show, and I think it was McKinsey had the report of what percentage of the Fortune 100 or 500 CEOs have set digital transformation as one of the primary objectives for the company. And these are examples of moving to that digital transformation, right? To do all of this in technology like this, to be more data driven. And so I think we're going to see only more of this.
Yeah, and then I think it's also about specific characteristics and things that people are really thinking about these days. So this is an example of a company just getting up and going, Legal Metrics, and they're really focused on diversity. And I know that's something, Wendy, you guys are thinking a lot about it, or curious, how you're thinking about what you're thinking about.
Sure. So again, that whole data idea. So we are now working to gather data on all of the providers that support us and being able to report and look at whether there's diversity in the leadership in our suppliers. And the same HBR report, they asked the general counsel, what are the top criteria for selecting your law firm? And the top 3 criteria was diversity, and it actually moved up 4 spots in terms of importance. And then we'll talk in a second. We are Mansfield Rule certified, but in the observatory, which we've built, one of the things that we're tracking, and it's self-reported by the providers, but whether or not there's diversity in leadership in these legal tech companies. So as we're all trying to separate, make our decisions and use our buying power, that's a factor that we can look at.
So that's kind of the first set of kind of, just to give you some examples of how people are thinking about firm attorney selection. I think the second set of tools is really thinking about real-time communications and updates on matters. And, you know, so just to talk about a couple companies here where, and to continue on that trend that Wendy hit on, that said, you know, it's all about data and how you use your data. So what Cocktimizer is trying to do is they're trying to help law firms look at all of their data and kind of make better decisions as they price out things like fixed fee engagements in the future. And it's a tool to really help law firms determine, you know, what it is so they can just be more flexible going forward. Aperio is a company out of the UK that is really focused on WIP hours and having budget visibility. And what this is this is something for clients to understand exactly where they are with matters. And then we've seen some, and then as law firms need to have, you know, strong hygiene in entering in timekeeping, we've seen this kind of change some dynamics in the way that law firms and clients interact. And, you know, there's some there's some interesting outcomes here that say there's less disputes because people understand what's in the bills. But at a high level, this is a tool that's supposed to be used equally between law firms and between their clients. And I'm curious, Wendy, your thoughts if there's like a happy medium for tools like this, or if it's difficult to keep all parties happy on the same type of tool.
So I think what's interesting on a tool like this is how many tools will the law firm need to license if the selection is made by the law department. And one of the challenges then is to become proficient in the tool. So it's just the same thing in the e-billing systems. We license many and this is one more layer. So that is, I think over time, I would predict that there'll have to be some platformization. I can only manage so many logins, even if I have my face login, right? It's just to remember where to go and what to look. But this idea of transparency is the future, hands down. And what you don't want is my AI battling your AI. So I'd rather that we're all looking at the same interface. And at least then we can talk it through. But the other thing that's interesting about this company, or at least it represents a trend, that there is absolutely a large number of great legal technology companies outside of the US, in Europe, I mean all over the world, but in Europe and the UK in particular. And the regulatory contrast between what a legal tech company is allowed to do in the UK and Europe in contrast to the US, I think drives some of that. And then we're seeing our own change. I'm sure most of the folks on the phone are following what's happening in Utah, Arizona, and California. But as those regulations change, I think you'll only see more excitement and advancement in tech.
Wendy thinks the transparency is super important going forward. Curious on a poll, how important do you guys think, if we do a quick poll, the real-time data is to tracking ongoing matters?
So this is interesting. We have a question, Zach, while people are answering. With so many great tools in the market now, are you seeing a decline in firms building custom tools themselves? I mean, I certainly have opinions on this, but it's going to be specific to Orrick. Do you want me to go first, or?
You go first, and then I'll give you my hat. Yeah.
So, you know, there are different strategies amongst the firms. There are incubators, there are spin-offs, there are partnerships with some of the alternative legal service providers. I suspect that many of the firms like us will go to the market first, but there are circumstances where there are still point solutions that need to be built. And there's so much money being spent. So I think it also depends on the complexity of the solution as to whether or not a law firm will build an advanced AI tool in contrast to an AI-based company. So for us, our strategy continues to be go to market first and only consider building if there isn't something in the market.
Yeah, so I think that it's a trend. You know, if you think about other industries, you know, I think it's a trend where it slows down with law firms building their own stuff. And I think that if you look at other industries 20, 30, 25 years ago, you would see other industries building their own accounting software. You know, businesses would have to build their own accounting. Nobody would ever think to do that right now. And I think right now we're in this like interesting hybrid stage. And Wendy, you kind of said it best, like you would look first to buy, you know, and if nothing's there, you then build. But I think the really important thing that people don't realize is it's not about getting the budget approved to build something this year. You know, it's about who is going to maintain this software in the next couple of years. What happens when, if it's an app on your iPhone, when that Apple releases a new build and all of a sudden your app doesn't work anymore. So I think that in the long run, you know, law firms stop building this technology because it just doesn't make sense. And I think that with all of this capital going into this space, you're going to see, you know, lots of third-party companies just piling developers into software, and it's going to be gorgeous, and you're not necessarily going to need to think to build. I also think there's a neat hybrid model, and maybe that's, I know we're going to talk, maybe it's even the next slide, but we talk about Joinder. And I think that's actually a really interesting one that says, you know, where people may say, hey, we had to build, we looked to buy, it wasn't out there, we had to build something, but we know that this may not be, inside a law firm may not be the best home for this software. So let's go partner up with maybe a VC like us or some other venture fund. Let's raise some capital and send the company along its way to help the ecosystem. But I think long-term, that trend of law firms building moves away, and, you know, law firms aren't software. They're just varied, and softwares aren't law firms. So,
so Zach, before we
yeah.
go on, we had one comment, not surprising, from the audience of pricing professionals. Just really, I think, a thoughtful point about our question on real-time access. And I think this is where even what we mean by terms becomes so important. So one of the attendees said you got to be really careful because you don't want the client to see the time before you've had a chance to look at it. What if somebody entered on the wrong matter number? And you may be closer to this, but I think all this real time often may mean some pre-filter by the law firm, but it's closer to real time rather than waiting for the invoice to be able to see, or maybe it's a cumulative spend, but not an individual entry, to help protect against that very important point made by one of the attendees.
Coincidentally, this company's actually the one on the screen still has had to think a lot about that. So there's actually different views that enable, you know, in some cases, the law firm, or in some examples of software, the law firm may have to approve something before it goes out. And maybe it's, you know, maybe it shifts to weekly or every 24 hours, but yeah, no, all of those points are valid. The wrong matter, you know, the partner would have wanted some of that time written off. All that stuff kind of goes here. But I think, so I would actually just call it a directional shift. But real time, yeah, that's a, I understand that we're not talking about like the second, we're talking about days, weeks, opposed to month or months. Joinder, maybe Wendy, why don't you give a little overview of what they're doing?
Yep. So this is a tool that we built in Orrick Labs and that we plan to spin out, and it's an example of the themes that we've been talking about. So Joinder is designed to put the legal work product that we all do in the hands of the client so that over time they have the ability to query and leverage, right? So it's that data exhaust that we were talking about, and being able to look at, you know, whether it's for knowledge management, you know, how many matters has Wendy done for us? And by the way, did we like her, and how much did it cost? Because right now, all of that legal work that we do for our clients lives and resides with the law firm. And as we move to digital companies, as we move to data-driven strategy, you have to have the data lake to query. And so Joinder will spin out so that Orrick is not going to take other law firms' work product, right? The client will own it and set this up. And then, of course, it has technology features behind it. So just like wonderful surgeons, you know, the studies showed once they created checklists, the mortality rate dropped dramatically, right? Anybody, and I don't mean to make light of this, but you can leave a sponge, and if you know to count the sponges, that's less likely to happen. So checklists to really help us all remember what we need to do, task assignments, pre-populated taxonomies, and then also AI on the back end to be able to file and organize this to reduce the administrative or human burden, and again, bring us all back to practicing at the top of our license. But we looked at this because when we went and looked at the market, those pieces were not together, and it probably seems odd that we would be creating something that would allow our competitors to put their data in the client's centralized location. But that is our understanding that this is the future, and we want to be on the point of the spear.
Yeah, and I think there's the purpose example of the concept of spinning a company out. Like we've had discussions, we all these companies, I think pretty much me or my partners, the fund, have spoken to, and we've introduced Joinder to several other law firms that were extraordinarily excited about teaming up and working together. So, and then I guess the final thing, you know, helping understand what it takes to execute on a matter and just review. Bright Flag is focused on billing hygiene. Criva is historically been a vendor risk management company where they are basically, if a law firm is going to give data to a third party, you want to make sure that third party is going to keep it secure. But they're actually getting now asked for diversity and inclusion assessments where they are now asking your vendors about these types of questions. And I think you guys are seeing the same type of thing, and you're trying to highlight that as well.
Yeah, so this is a screenshot of the observatory that we will launch and will be available to everybody in the market soon. And you'll just see the highlight where you will be able to query, I want to look at all, you know, AI tools and contract lifecycle management, and do they have diversity in their leadership? So we're really excited to make all this information available. We have a question in the chat which was posed to me, which is how are you getting people to use all this technology? And it's a great question. And the answer is we can always be better, and it's really hard as a starting point. There was a headline, and it's not just how are we getting our colleagues to use it, but how are we talking to our clients? And we hear over and over again, we're not telling them enough. And there was a headline at Legal Tech News this morning that said, law firms are keeping us in the dark on legal tech, complained general counsel. And we hear this, and we do these innovation conversations, we do innovation reports to our clients, and we're hearing we need to do more. Intuitively, we talk to our clients about the outcome of a matter or the strategy, and we don't talk about the technology that we're using or the alternative delivery of legal service model. And so we are working to do more of that. It's a very concrete way. We've created innovation credit for our associates. So to the extent that they join us on piloting tools, if they're part of the rollout, if they help us vet something, they get credit. But it is hard. And one of our clients who is a real thought leader on this, Jason Barnwell, and has participated in our innovation advisory boards. We have general counsel of clients as well as some non-clients who help us think about our strategy, has reminded us over and over again, just the fatigue and cost of each new technology that you bring in and the training. And so, you know, that even thinking about it that way, we get really excited, and we try, in particular in the delivery of legal services, often the selection of the tool is matter specific. So it's not an enterprise license. We're not using the same contract lifecycle management tool for every client. But for the client or for our colleagues, having to learn another tool, have another login is hard. So we try to create the right financial incentives. It's part of our business plans for our partners. But I think the way that we're most successful, and many folks here, sorry, I have my computer phone here, so this is just showing you my technical limitations. I don't know if you guys can hear that. And it's not going to stop. So
We can hear it.
Yeah, good. So our chairman talks about this and routinely and regularly at our partner meetings. in our leadership, at our executive staff. And so it really is part of our DNA. But I recognize it's hard and we need to constantly do more. And if anybody in the Q&A has suggestions too, I would certainly love to hear them.
I actually think on that note, questions. We so yeah, and by the way, my email's there. If any, glad to chat with anybody. We're super excited about everything. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you everybody. But we got a few minutes for questions if we want to squeeze one or two in.
And we've got another one. So the question is, if a firm invests in technology that improves service delivery and reduces lawyer hours, do you think they will be able to pass some of the cost through to clients with creative, i.e. non-hourly pricing? So I don't know if you want to take the first one or you want me to take that one?
Yeah, you take, I have thought, but you please take it.
So much of the thought leadership is that more and more legal services will be consumed with alternative fee arrangements or fixed fees. So when that's the case, it's all the better for technology because it allows you more predictability and to be able to hit those targets. Many of the technologies that were in Zach's slide, I know are often passed on to clients in the same way that you see e-discovery tools. I think it just very much depends on the service line, the client, the fee arrangement, but there's the potential there. And Zach, I don't know if you have other thoughts on that.
So we think the same thing. We also see that like some of the technologies that a lot of the stuff that we're looking at that's in other industries, like that commercial lease one that I described to you in the beginning, that's really like the lowest level work that we actually see. A lot of law firms don't necessarily want to do that work. Like they're thrilled to do it, but that's not what they want to help clients figure out more complex problems. So what we think is really neat is like we see firms that say, you know what, we want to buy some software like that, give it away to our clients for free, because we think that if they start using these platforms and we're helping to administer them, that when they have more complex work or there's M&A work, that logically they're going to have to call us for that because we're going to be helping them all on the way. So what gets us excited is like, I mean, same philosophy saying like, but it's almost like a little bit of a change in a business model. But I think there's a whole cohort of firms that if they're forward thinking on the tech side, they can almost use the technology to punch above their weight class, and I think it's, so from our end, yeah, that gets us super excited. And by no means am I saying this is, do we ever say technology is the end of attorneys? It's more, or it's going to replace people. It's more just like, it enables people to move towards that higher level thought work opposed to the lower level execution work.
All right, so another question. Do you have one ready?
Maybe the last one, but because we were told we have to stop at one, but yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is a question for predictions on platformization.
Take it.
So the question is, am I going to predict who? I'm not going to predict who. I don't know if you want to, Zach, but I will say it's inevitable. And you're already seeing it.
You're definitely seeing examples of it. I think the question is, you have all of these different levels of problems people are going after. And there's usually one level that rises and becomes the most important level. And I'll give you a sense, like the companies that can integrate in the best with all of the existing systems, if firms are not going to change their systems, if you say, here's all the existing systems, we're going to be a layer on top of it. In theory, every application that needs to get built gets built on top of that layer. So we try to think of these as like layers opposed to specific, and kind of who sits in the most strategic and important layer. And I think you're going to, so that's the type of ways that we go about, and we're actually building a thesis right now around this stuff. It's just like, where do you play in the stack? because that says like how strategically, you know, how easy it is for you to move into other areas, whether through organically growing or whether through making acquisitions. All righty. I think that I think that we are basically out of time. We will give everybody 2 minutes of their day back. Wendy, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for all the questions. I thought that made it much more interesting, so I appreciate the audience participation.
Yes, and thanks everybody for joining, and you know, looking forward to meeting everybody over weeks, months, and years to come. Thanks everybody.